Have you ever wondered why some women live alone? No boyfriend, no partner, and seemingly no interest in seeking one. The reason isn't loneliness, a lack of options, or heartbreak. It's rooted in something deeper, more uncomfortable, something that challenges traditional beliefs about a woman's place. When a woman chooses solitude, she isn't lost, she's discovering herself. And that kind of self-realization doesn't come with praise, likes, or companionship. It comes in silence, through strength, and with a kind of freedom most still struggle to comprehend. No, she's not lonely. She's discerning. She's not cold. She simply stopped pouring her warmth into people who never intended to receive it. There's something deeply unsettling about a woman who feels complete without a relationship. It disrupts the logic of control, dismantles the illusion of emotional dependence, and reveals an uncomfortable truth. Many men don't know how to respond to a woman who doesn't need saving, and many women are only beginning to recognize themselves. In that quiet yet powerful reflection, Carl Jung once said that everything we repress becomes part of our shadow. Many of these single women represent that collective shadow. They embody what others dream of, but lack the bravery to pursue. They don't chase love. They stand by their choices. They don't showcase themselves for attention. They retreat to protect their peace. They're not chasing fairy tales, they're invested in inner calm. And that challenges people, because in a world that pushes urgency around relationships, these women have embraced the strength of being alone. The woman who lives without a boyfriend isn't adrift. She's navigating life on another frequency, one where nothing is begged for, only chosen, where validation isn't necessary, presence is enough. Maybe that's why she attracts criticism, judgment, and efforts to define her. But what many don't realize is that behind her supposed absence is a presence that transcends, that confronts the emotional norms. She isn't seeking just any love. She seeks a love that allows her to expand, not shrink. And until she finds that, she stands firm, whole, content, and grounded. Maybe this seems like pride, exaggeration, or emotional withdrawal to you. But deep within, there's a quiet question you can't ignore. What if that silent path leads to the most essential kind of love, the one that begins with self? The silence surrounding a woman who lives alone isn't emptiness. It's a sanctuary. And those who don't understand that often label her as cold, distant, or arrogant. What they fail to see is that she didn't construct that space to block the world. She created it to preserve herself. Jung also noted that what we avoid within ourselves, we end up projecting outward. Perhaps that's why many still equate solitude with lack, when in truth, it's often the most fertile ground for growth. While others search for meaning through connections, this woman turned inward. There, in the vast silence of her unconscious, she confronted the ghosts she had long ignored: childhood pain, silent abandonments, love disguised as attachment. Her choice to be alone didn't emerge from an open wound, but from a scar that had finally healed. She hasn't stopped believing in love. She simply stopped settling for the kind that made her feel small. This woman knows chaos. She's loved until she lost herself. She's given too much. She's pleaded for scraps that never should have been offered. But eventually, she awakened. Not all at once, but through a chain of disappointments that gradually stopped hurting and started teaching. What you see in her isn't coldness. It's emotional growth. And maturity is intimidating. It asks for presence, depth, and honesty. She's not interested in just any companionship. She seeks mutuality. She's no longer drawn to empty promises. She values genuine presence. Perhaps that's why some find her hard to reach, because she doesn't want rescuing. She wants to be truly seen, and that takes more than charm or flattery. It requires courage to explore the emotional depths few are willing to face. That's where many fall short, not because she's too complex, but because she's complete. And when a woman becomes whole, the world responds in two ways: admiration or fear. Admiration from those on a similar journey toward wholeness, and fear from those who still depend on others to feel complete. She doesn't aim to complete anyone. She wants to overflow. Beside someone who's already full, she remains alone, not by accident or misfortune, but out of loyalty to her own soul. This woman isn't hiding, she's protecting herself. There's a meaningful difference between isolation and self-preservation, though the world rarely recognizes it. We live in a society that still clings to the idea that happiness only comes in pairs. It questions anyone who chooses to walk alone, as if being single signals failure. Carl Jung once said that where convention dominates, authenticity struggles to survive. And this woman doesn't live by convention. She lives by truth. When she hears comments like, "You're too selective," or "No one is perfect," she simply smiles, a quiet, knowing, almost ironic smile. Because what many call too picky is to her the bare minimum, the standard it took her years to realize she deserves. She's not seeking perfection. She's seeking someone emotionally mature enough to love without causing harm. Someone who's done the deep inner work she herself has faced. And let's be honest, such people aren't easily found. The discomfort she causes doesn't come from her words, but from what she represents. She is living proof that happiness doesn't require dependence on others. That truth strips away facades, especially from men who thrive on women's insecurities, and from women still seeking validation, who may feel silently judged. But she's not here to challenge anyone, she's simply existing. And in that authenticity, earned through freedom, she becomes a mirror, exposing the inner chains others still carry. She isn't in a rush. She refuses to hurry for anyone's expectations. She honors her own timing, and in doing so, quietly disturbs a world that demands instant gratification. She seeks depth while society chases distractions. She craves presence while the world offers superficial attention. She longs for soulful connection, while others aim to look impressive on their next Instagram story. When she says no, it's not a test. It's honesty. When she walks away, it's not for effect. It's protection. When she chooses solitude over hollow company, it's not pride, it's clarity. And that clarity, earned through pain and surrender, is her quiet rebellion. She doesn't live to please, she lives to be. And that simple choice, to be, is what makes her so unsettling to the system. Perhaps what disturbs people most about her isn't her solitude. It's the peace she's found in it. Carl Jung once said, "Those who look outward dream, but those who look inward awaken." And it's that inward path she chose. It wasn't easy. It meant removing masks, confronting emotional dependence, and rebuilding herself, one piece at a time. She no longer sees herself through others' eyes. She sees herself clearly, completely, and finally through her own eyes, and that changes everything. How often have you questioned whether being alone is a sign of failure or a form of freedom? How many times have you felt the pressure to explain why there's no one by your side? She has felt that too. She once believed something was wrong with her for being alone in a world that glorifies couples, even unhappy ones. But one day she realized, it's better to be alone than to feel unseen in a relationship. And from that moment, she made a promise to herself. She would never again settle for less than what she truly deserves. Her journey isn't a straight line. There are days filled with doubt, waves of nostalgia, and nights wrapped in silence. But with every choice made, with clarity, her strength continues to grow. She learned that real love doesn't trap, drain, or control. The love she seeks is one that frees, uplifts, and supports, without suffocating. Until that kind of love finds her, she chooses to keep growing alone, not because of pride, but because of self-respect. She is the living example of Jung's concept of individuation. She broke apart, confronted her darkness, dove into the depths of her unconscious, and returned more complete than ever. Now that she knows who she is, she refuses to be half of anything. She doesn't need someone to complete her. She wants someone who can meet her in that same awareness, and that's intimidating because it requires emotional maturity. Sadly, few are ready to love with that kind of responsibility. Most still love from a place of emptiness, of possession, out of fear. And yet, if she walks alone today, it's because each step carries the weight of lessons learned. Every time she says no, it's an act of self-respect. Every time she chooses distance, it's a reminder that love should never be something we plead for. She no longer feels the need to prove herself to anyone. That deep inner certainty rising from her soul changes everything around her. A woman who has found herself again becomes powerful, not because she holds weapons, but because she sees everything clearly. The woman who lives alone now, without a partner, is not the same woman who once begged for affection. Something within her broke, and that very break was what gave her freedom, because sometimes it's only through falling apart that the soul discovers its new shape. Carl Jung once said, "A tree that reaches heaven must have roots that reach down to hell." And that's exactly what she experienced. She descended into the darkest parts of her story. She faced deep-rooted fears, inherited pain, and wounds that didn't begin with her, but were passed down through generations of women before her. She broke the cycle. She walked away from relationships that replayed toxic patterns. She learned it was never her duty to fix anyone, rescue anyone, or settle for less out of fear of being alone. And when she finally stopped accepting the bare minimum, the world tried to make her feel she was wrong. But she stood firm, first with hesitation, then with growing awareness, and finally, with unshakable strength, because someone who has faced their own darkness no longer fears the silence it leaves behind. She has learned the power of silence to nourish herself, finding warmth in her own presence. She is not distant or unapproachable, but has simply chosen not to allow herself to be overwhelmed. There is a significant difference between opening your heart and allowing it to be torn apart. She remains open, but only to those who approach with honesty, not rehearsed words or empty promises. She has seen enough to recognize the difference between true connection and mere performance. Her intuition is keen, and her energy serves as a filter. She can sense from afar what lacks depth, and she does not hesitate to walk away from it. Her transformation goes beyond the surface. It is profound and archetypal. It feels as though she has tapped into an ancient wisdom, a memory reminding her that women were not born to serve, but to express, not to be molded, but to overflow. In reconnecting with that wisdom, something awakened within her. A wild, intuitive, emotionally sovereign woman. Though she may be alone, she is far from lost. She is in communion with something greater, her own destiny. No matter how much they try to label her as cold, difficult, or distant, none of it sticks because she no longer lives to fit in. She lives to expand. She does not fight for attention. She radiates presence. She no longer waits to be chosen. She is the one who does the choosing. This shift in perspective baffles those who still seek to control the feminine, but she is no longer part of that narrative. She has crossed the threshold, and on the other side, she has discovered that the true relationship begins only after you have loved yourself enough to not need anyone. There is something sacred in the way she moves through the world. She does not need applause or validation from others. Her confidence is quiet, and it is within this silence that her true strength lies. As Carl Jung said, everything we face within eventually becomes our destiny. Perhaps this is why, in choosing herself time and time again, She has become the author of a destiny that few can understand, but many secretly envy. She no longer tries to fill emptiness with promises or convince anyone that she deserves love. She doesn't beg for a place in anyone's life because she understands that presence should never be demanded. It should be invited. And when that invitation does not come from a place of truth, she simply declines. She does not respond with anger or bitterness. Instead, she steps away with the dignity of someone who has been lost too many times to let the same wounds occur again. What many fail to realize is that this woman still longs for love. She still yearns to be held and touched. She seeks a connection, but without losing her true self. For too long, she tried to fit into boxes that were too small for the soul she carries. Now she only offers herself where there's space to be whole. This requires a level of maturity that goes beyond mere romance. It requires awareness, self-reflection, and the courage to face one's own darkness while still choosing to love. She isn't searching for fairy tales. She's looking for a genuine soul connection where there is no domination or submission. It's a bond where both individuals can grow side by side without stifling their individuality, silencing their pain, or shrinking their dreams. If this seems too demanding for some, so be it. She'd rather wait than settle for scraps of emotional affection. Many may call it arrogance, but in truth it's just self-love in its most authentic form. What we are seeing is a new kind of woman, one who has turned away from the superficial and embraced depth. She grew tired of being desired for shallow reasons and chose instead to be respected. She chose solitude, not because she gave up on love, but because she realized that true love never requires self-denial. Once a woman understands this, her entire world shifts. She no longer needs to raise her voice to be heard. Her mere presence speaks volumes. Wherever she goes, the energy changes, like an invisible shift in the room. This isn't mystical. This is the energy of someone who has fought the hardest inner battles and chosen peace, not because she overcame all her fears, but because she learned to live with them without being conquered. As Carl Jung would say, she achieved wholeness, not by removing opposing forces, but by integrating them. This woman doesn't reject love. Rather, she has learned not to settle for unbalanced relationships where one must dim their light for the other to shine. She yearns for a love where her essence doesn't need to be altered, a love where she can embrace both her shadow and her light, her laughter and her tears, her silence and her voice. She experienced a storm within herself because she realized that those who love only the easy, beautiful parts have yet to understand what true love is. Those who seek constant sweetness fail to grasp the importance of the bitterness that is essential for personal growth. She is too complete to settle for half measures, too independent to accept constraints disguised as care, and too sensitive to endure shallow connections. Yet she is strong enough to continue on her chosen path, even when it's painful, lonely, and misunderstood. This is the journey of a soul that has awakened, one that has given up the need for instant validation in exchange for deeper truths. Deep down, the world fears women like her. Women who don't need validation, who don't bend to others, and who refuse to be shaped by outside forces. These women challenge hidden systems, question outdated norms, and break silent emotional contracts that once stated a woman only holds value if she is with someone. When she breaks free from these constraints and rewrites her own story, she inspires others, and that is seen as dangerously revolutionary by the system. She continues, sometimes shedding tears, sometimes standing tall, but always with her feet firmly planted on the ground. She knows now that she is not alone. She has herself. And after all she has experienced, that is more than enough. The love that comes after this transformation won't be salvation. It will be a celebration. It won't come to fill her. It will come to overflow. When a woman chooses to walk alone, society rushes to convince her she is making a mistake. But deep down, She feels something shifting within her, not pride or rebellion, but a rare kind of wisdom, one that can only be birthed in silence. This is the same wisdom Carl Jung described as individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself without masks or compromise. Once this happens, nothing external has more power than the truth that lives within her. This truth doesn't need to shout. It reveals itself in how she quietly closes a door without resentment, how she withdraws when the environment no longer nurtures her, and how she smiles in peace even when alone. She has discovered that being alone is not a punishment. It is a vow of loyalty to her soul. The soul of an awakened woman does not submit, dim, or beg. It simply exists, and that is more than enough. The world will keep trying to convince her that something is missing, offering distractions and superficial love. But she has already seen through the illusion. She understands that it's not about finding someone else, it's about never losing herself again. When this realization takes root, everything changes. Desire becomes discernment, lack becomes choice, waiting becomes a path. What once caused pain now teaches. What once confined her now sets her free. You can feel it deep within, a stirring, a spark. It might be a memory, an old wound, or something that never made sense. It might be the image of a woman you once knew, or perhaps the woman you have become. In either case, something inside you is calling to be seen more clearly. It no longer fits into old molds, and if you allow it, this transformation could completely change how you experience love, others, and most importantly, yourself. The woman who lives alone is more than someone who simply doesn't fit the mold. She is a living symbol of emotional freedom, a reminder that it is possible to rebuild without rushing, without fear, and without the need to prove anything to anyone. She doesn't walk ahead of others, but she doesn't follow either. She carves her own unique, undeniable path, and along the way, she ignites small sparks for others who are waking up too. If this story has touched something inside of you, perhaps it's because deep down, you're ready for a new kind of love, a love that begins with reconciliation with yourself. It's a love that thrives on silence, presence, and truth. A love that can't be bargained for, begged for, or disguised. If that love hasn't come yet, maybe it's because you needed to become the woman who no longer accepts less than she deserves. If this message has found you at just the right moment or awakened something you had forgotten, I encourage you to share this video with other women who need to remember their own strength. Like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, not out of impulse but by choice. Because when something resonates with your soul, the least we can do is let it continue to resonate, both within us and through us.